Winston Churchill once said, "We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give." Today on Art of Purpose, we have the one and only Greg Rizio, one of the premier trial attorneys in California.
I've always really, truly lived by the motto of, I want to treat others the way that I want to be treated. And actually, I think the real motto is, I want to treat other people better than I want them to treat me. We don't do it for the money. We do it to make sure that we are loving on people, taking care of people, giving them their best day. To me, it's not really about winning or losing. Clearly, I like to win more than lose, but it's really about making sure that my client feels like they've had their day in court. I want to make this profession honorable. No one's going to remember me 100 years when I die, but I do want to make sure that this profession is in better shape when I'm gone than it is while I'm here.
Today on Art of Purpose, we have the one and only Greg Rizio. Greg is one of the premier trial attorneys in California, having been named Trial Attorney of the Year by just about every prestigious attorney organization out there. He is past president of the Consumer Attorneys of California, and he is directly responsible, both during his tenure and even after his tenure, for protecting some of the most important laws for consumers throughout the state. He quite literally fought to protect all California consumers for well over a year without taking a dime. On this episode, Greg will share with us his journey across life, his profession, his business, and share golden nuggets of advice that you are not going to want to miss. And on a personal note, Greg has been such an amazing supporter of myself, of ours, and has always been willing to help, lend a hand, share advice, and mentor. And on top of all the accolades, somehow, Greg is an even better person. Greg, welcome to Art of Purpose, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, let me just say, Kenny, it's an honor to be here, and I have always been a big believer of you are who you hang out with, and hanging out with you and your sister and your team and the CAOIE, we have a great community, and it's a complete honor to be here. I have always said you do it right. I love the way you practice. I love the way you care for your clients, and I'm super proud and happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Greg, and thank you for making the time, because you are very busy. I'm a very busy man, so thank you for coming out here.
That's not just me.
And before we get started, I just want to remind everybody to like and subscribe, and we just had a little bit of a hardware difficulty for the first time.
It's like trial. It's always going to happen, right? Something's going to go wrong. That's okay.
No worries. All right. Well, hey, it's got to happen every now and then, right? So before we get started, just want to remind everybody to like and subscribe, to comment, to share videos. If you have a guest that you'd like to hear on our podcast, send us a DM. We really want to hear from you. And thank you so much for going on this journey with us. All right, so we're going to start. We typically start with just kind of going through the background, kind of how our guests grew up, what was life like, how they got to become an attorney, where that desire came in, and we're going to get to that. But before we do that, I want to ask you, and this is not something that you would bring up yourself, but I want to ask you about and ask you to talk about it. Is about 3 weeks ago, you wrapped up with a trial in San Bernardino, an employment case, and you got a massive $41 million verdict. And for all our listeners, I know that's something that's of great interest, and they really want to hear about that, right? Can you tell us, what was that case? How did that come about? And maybe how, I remember actually hearing about the case factually and thinking, ooh, that one's going to be interesting, right? It certainly wasn't set up as a home run, but you and your team did that. And maybe there's one or two things that you guys saw as you were developing that case throughout trial that turned it into what it became.
So it's a framing issue, Kenny, as usual. It would be easy to frame this case as, my client quit her own job after 21 days and we won $41 million and how great we are. That's not really how I see this case. This case was a case where our client had worked with her aunt for 25 years, taking care of the developmentally disabled. Over 15 homes of 90 people she took care of. When her aunt retired, she sold it to an individual who owned 2 developmentally disabled homes. And she hired my client to come in and to oversee all 17 homes. When my client came in, she went to the 2 homes that the individual owned and saw what horrified her. in regards to the way that these other two homes were being managed. And her love of her own individuals, many of whom she had been with since she was a child, made her fearful for what was going to happen. So she bravely reported it to her boss first, the owner, who then ignored it. And then she ended up calling over to San Bernardino Regional Center and reporting it. And she ended up getting retaliated against and fired. So what the case was really about was framing. It was an issue of our client lost her identity for being brave and trying to protect those who can't protect themselves. And, I'd love to say how great we are. We did do a very, you don't win a verdict like that without being pretty good. But at the same
100%.
time, it's like, a lot of times you kind of look and think, I'm not sure the defense counsel took the right tact in that case. I think if you were on the defense, I'm not winning $41 million. Let's just say that.
And you have to be able to capitalize on that stuff as well, right? So it does require the team, and it does require you to do that, because the same thing could happen to another attorney and not capitalize on it.
Yeah, I mean, look, trial's trial, and I tend to kind of have a pretty good feel in there. I do a lot of unconventional things that I'm not sure I would recommend to others, but I just kind of have a feel sometimes. For an example, in the middle of trial, the defendant all of a sudden started saying that she was the person in charge of this one house, and it's called a QIDP, right? And I was the QIDP of this house, and I was the QIDP of this house. Well, then she ends up calling one of her own employees from that house, and the employee gets up there, and in the middle of it, it becomes clear to me when I'm crossing him that he doesn't know she's taken that tact, right? So right in the middle of it, I'm like, now, sir, you were in that house all the time, right? Yeah. And who was the QIDP of that house? Oh, it was this other guy, blah, starts naming the guy. And I'm like, now, was there, you would know if there was other QIDPs, right? Yes. And you would understand if someone else had been there, you'd been there for years, right? Yeah. So the only QIDP was this guy, Andre, right? Yeah. So obviously she lied. And then we get into punitive damages, and the defendant hurt herself. She made up a bunch of numbers. She gave us a profit loss. And in the punitive phase, it was kind of funny. She showed that she had spent over the course of a year like $1.7 million to buy this computers, right? Of course, she only spent $300,000 on food and clothing for 90 people. So I got to have a lot of fun with, the 1.7 on computers and 300, like that's like $9 a day for food and clothes of these people, of 90 disabled, developmentally disabled. So, wrapping yourself around the story of, that my client, and I literally said this at the end, she was a heroine, right? I mean, she was a hero in that she was trying to protect those who can't protect themselves. So framing it that way and going that way, and then the defense kind of taking a different tact that we kind of destroyed in voir dire was helpful.
How do you guys, and I know a little bit about this answer, so which is why I'm asking it, but arrive at framing these cases? Is it a group thing? Is it you do as a team? Because that varies from attorney team to attorney team, and I think some are more successful than others, and you have clearly been successful.
Well, as you know, we actually bring everyone into the conference room. It doesn't matter who you are. Could be, could be my son who kind of runs some of our graphic stuff. And we sit down and we kind of walk through the story. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter whether you're a lawyer. We want to know what you think, because whoever you are, you could be a juror. So in this case, we sat around and we knew that the case really came down to how much the jury either liked or hated my client or liked or hated the defendant. And framing that issue, was important. So the defendant was taking a position that they fired my client because she was committing tax fraud in her mileage. She would submit mileage, and she was making a lot of money. I mean, basically, the miles she was claiming was from here to New York every other week and back, right? And there's no way she drives that much in 19 homes that are all about 12 miles apart. So the defendant wanted to say that our client was committing fraud, and she discovered this fraud. What the defendant didn't realize is we have emails from her and my client, where my client's like, really, I'd really rather you just pay me a salary of $240,000 and then I'll just pay the tax. So, in voir dire, in the mini opening, Taylor DeRosa did a brilliant job, basically said in his mini opening, ladies and gentlemen, you might not like my client or the defendant because there was, this tax issue going on. And we set it up in the mini opening, and then in voir dire, I kind of hammered that. And so at the end, when it turned out that the defendant was really the one that kind of took that tact, and they, they just took a bad tact.
Yeah.
So it helped.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, you love trials. Would that be fair to say? Or what was the question? Yeah, the question is like, do you still find them exciting? Like,
trials
how do you
stress
feel about
me
trial?
out.
Yeah,
right. Trials are stressful. I don't care. I mean, if I'm trying to missed case, I'm not that stressed, right? I don't try too many missed cases anymore. But I really take to heart that I'm trying my client's case, and I want them to feel like they had their best day ever in court. So, I always say that the best diet for me is trial, because I'm not going to eat very much in trial because I'm taking on the burden of my client, and it's stressful. So I'm not going to say I don't like trial, because I do like trial, but it does stress me out. And mostly because I look at my clients and, much like you're doing it for somebody. It has meaning to them. It's their life, and it's important.
Because there's the exercise of trial and, being able to demonstrate skills and do all that, which can be fun. But what you're rightly pointing out is that it's not just about that. You're carrying the burden of your client's hopes and what they're bringing into this and what happened to them, right?
And I've tried enough cases and lost enough cases where you see the disappointment in their face, right? And that's a double loss. That's an emotional loss for somebody who's like,
worse.
So anyone who's tried enough cases is lost, and they've seen the pain in their clients. In fact, one time in a case, I did a closing argument. It was a really hard case. I was surprised I didn't lose on motion for summary judgment. My client signed a waiver saying, I'll never sue, ever. Oh, my goodness. Then he sues, and we have to overcome the waiver. And when we overcame the motion for summary judgment, I was a little surprised. And then I tried the case, and at the end of my closing, I remember looking at my client, and under the table, he's like giving me these thumbs up, like, you just killed it. And I sat down and I leaned over and I said to him, look, Lewis, I hate to tell you, we're still going to lose this case. Right? And so we go to lunch, the jury's out. He's all excited. He's convinced that we crushed it. And I keep telling him, don't get your hopes up, don't get your hopes up. And I told him, I said, I literally want you to write a letter for my future clients, like what it's like to go through trial. And sure enough, I was unfortunately Nostradamus, and we lost. And he was devastated. He couldn't even write the letter. Like, he was that devastated. So it's just hard.
No, absolutely. I've had a similar experience as well. It's one of those where you know what's coming as well, but you're still doing your absolute best. And for me, sometimes even in the middle of that, you somehow have a moment of like, you know what? I think we can.
Yeah. Right? Oh, you always think. Yeah, you're always convincing yourself. But it's fun, And even then, like, he knew he got his best day, right? Like, it's like I gave him what he wanted. He had his day in court.
They're grateful.
His offer was zero. What was he going to do anyway? And he ended up really happy, right? I wouldn't say happy. He lost. But he knew that he had his trial, and he knew that he...
I'm grateful to you for having done through all that.
And that also makes you feel guilty, right? It's like they lost, and yet they're still thanking you, and they love you for all the good job you did. And you feel like, I just wish I could have won for you.
Absolutely. Are there any skills or traits that maybe you think that young people who are looking at the being a trial attorney or as an attorney as a possible profession, that maybe they could identify in themselves and go like, hey, like if I'm good at this, like I think I might be pretty good at being a trial attorney, or I want to be a trial attorney, but I don't think I have those qualities. What are some things that you say, hey, you know what, be mindful of these things and develop those?
I would say try and be quick on your feet. Right. I mean, if you can quickly retort and kind of hit someone like a zinger, it's just as fun, like with your buddies. That's a good trait. If you can think on your feet relatively quickly and not go into something. I mean, I'm pretty quick on my feet, but I'm also compartmentalizing things pretty well. So something will come to me and I'll be like, I'm not going to do this, right? Quickly. Because if you do it wrong, it can go the other way. I'll give you an example. In my case, in my case, right? You always hear never ask the question, that you don't know the answer to. Well, the defense counsel in this case just kept asking question after question, you know the answer to it. I'm thinking, you moron, shut up, right? You're helping me. And he objected to everything that was technically correct to object to. But the jury hated him, right? Because it's like, objection vague. All right, let me fix it quickly, right? Or Taylor will fix it quickly. And then the evidence came in anyway. Yeah. And you can see the jury's just getting more and more mad. But he was so proud of himself for getting objections sustained.
Technically correct, yeah.
Right. So I would just say it's not easy to be a plaintiff lawyer, as you well know. Yeah. I mean, it's poker, but you have big money in the center of the pot, and you have 12 to 14 people, depending upon how many alternates and whether they get in, are going to make that decision for you. Yeah. So it's pretty stressful, but you have to be able to say, I can think quickly, I can clarify things, I can kind of categorize things, I can frame things. It's not an easy gig, as you well know, because you're good at it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned that because, people can be quick on their feet, but if there's no filter, right, then you're just stepping into problems.
Yeah. Don't step in it. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. I want to share with you that this episode is brought to you by the Law Office of Kenny S. Ramirez. Now, life can change in an instant. Whether it's a car accident that wasn't your fault, a slip and fall in a grocery store, or even the tragic loss of a loved one. And the aftermath can feel overwhelming. You might be dealing with trying to get medical treatment, medical bills, missing work, calls from the insurance company, or just the stress of not knowing what to do next. That's where we come in. At the Law Office of Kenny S. Ramirez, you have a team, a family of accident attorneys who are here to give you back your time and peace of mind. We're here to help you get the maximum compensation you deserve so you can focus on healing and getting back to what matters most to you, your life, your family, your future. If you or someone you know needs some guidance and support after an accident, click the link in the description below for a free case evaluation. You'll speak with our team and we'll help you get your life back on track. And we're committed to being by your side every single step of the way. No matter life's challenges, you don't have to face it alone. We're here for you. Now let's get back into the episode.
So we in the legal community know, again, about your massive verdicts, about your success, your acumen, your leadership, and all of that. But what people may not know so much about is Greg, the person, right, growing up and how you arrived at all this, Greg before all this success. So can you talk to us a little bit about that? Where did you grow up? How was life growing up, and just a little bit of peek into the background.
So I was actually born and sort of raised in New Jersey, but I moved out here junior high schoolish, and I actually went to high school with Eric Trout. Most people don't know that. Wow. We knew each other. We played soccer together on the very first varsity soccer team of our high school. Oh, wow. That's cool. Go Lancers, Sunny Hills High. And so I've been out here since.
Can I tell you, by the way, New Jersey explains a lot
about me.
I love it. I love it. Yeah.
So my son laughs because the joke is I always say, the thing that explains about me is I'm an Italian attorney from New Jersey. And those three things, that's all you need to know, and you understand who I am, right?
That's cool.
I mean, I'm loud, I talk a lot, I use my hands a lot, I don't care, it's just who
perfect.
I am.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
I moved out here in high school, and I was very religious growing up, very religious, raised. At one point, people thought I'd be a priest. And I've always really, truly lived by the motto of, I want to treat others the way that I want to be treated. And actually, I think the real motto is I want to treat other people better than I want them to treat me. And so my grandmother, when I was young, said, you should be a lawyer. When I went to college, I actually thought I'm going to be either like a pastor, priest, or a lawyer, right? And I was joked that the little red dude on this shoulder was kind of a little louder than the white dude on this shoulder, or man or woman on this shoulder. So I
both require great speaking skills.
Both do, and I've never been shy. Yeah. You guys all know that I love to hear myself talk. Another big quality of me. So I ended up deciding to go to law school because I never felt the calling to do anything else. And Kenny, what I love most is that I actually feel like I am sort of a pastor priest to my, That's cool. I like represent people. They are my flock. They are my, parishioners. And I get to treat them better than I hope they treat me. I get to live my faith. And it's just, to me, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, and I think in the way that, well, stepping back just a little bit off of that, then as you're going through college, you said you didn't feel any calling to do anything else. Grandma tells you when you're young, hey, you should be an attorney. It's something very similar to me. It's just like it was put in your head and you're like, all right, I'm gonna be an attorney, I guess.
Grandma knows. Who knows better than grandma, right? Yeah.
Was there at any point some, maybe desire to do something else, or do you just and how do you land at like plaintiff's attorney as well?
So I always wanted to be a district attorney.
Okay.
The funny thing is I wanted to be a judge, right? And I didn't realize I had to be a lawyer first. I wasn't that smart. So I come out of law school and I think, if I'm going to do anything, I want to do something honorable, right? So I want to be a DA. So I ended up starting off in the district attorney's office. Yeah. And then I realized the politics of the DA's office. And it's not that it's not honorable, it is, but there's politics, right? I mean, they're going to force you to represent someone or do something. I remember my very first 1538.5 suppression motion. I go down, they go down and interview the cop, and I go down and I interview the cop, and and there used to be a thing called pretext stops where you can't sit outside of a bar and watch someone walk out and then follow them. It's exactly what this cop did. So I walked down and I talked to him and I said, so tell me, why did you pull them over? Well, I saw him leave the bar. I was just sitting there waiting. And when I saw him leave the bar, I just followed him for a while. They didn't break any laws, but finally, they flicked a cigarette out. The passenger did. I got him out. I pulled him over because I wanted to see if he was drunk. Total violation of the law.
Yeah, that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
So I go upstairs and I go to my boss and I go, I can't do this. Like, this is a total violation of the law. My boss goes, well, go down there and don't ask the question and, leave a hole big enough if the public defender's good enough. And my very first case, right? And I'm like, all right, there goes the honor of the DA, something right? It's all about the ends justifies the means. Yeah. So I was there and I still wanted to be there. And ultimately I left there and I came up to the Inland Empire. I took a job at an insurance defense firm.
Oh, wow.
Because I couldn't be an ambulance chaser, right. And I met my wife there. Thank you for Brooklyn Smith and Peckham. And, ultimately I left because I really kind of wanted to go back to San Diego. I left that firm and I started at a criminal defense firm that also did some personal injury, and I had experience in both. And they promised me they were going to open a San Diego office for me. So that's why I took the job. So then I'm taking a deposition in Santa Ana, and the senior partner's watching, and he tells me at the end, he goes, "I'm not sending you to San Diego. You're too good at this PI, and I want to build it here."
Yeah.
All right. Well, that pretty much ruined my whole experience of why I took the job.
Yeah.
So I broke off with a couple guys. We started our own practice around 95, 96-ish, and ever since.
Yeah. And so you end up doing the not ambulance chasing, personal injury, right?
It's not ambulance chasing. It is not.
And that's kind of where I wanted to get to, right? Is because and part of it, maybe if you can talk to us, maybe connect us a little bit, your upbringing, you mentioned there's religious upbringing, but then just the model that you carried then throughout life. Sometimes people want to be attorneys because there's a lot of money involved. There's a potential for a lot of money, right? And that's sort of what they're seeking. So things like what you saw in your first year, your first day at the district attorney's office might not bother them, right? Because again, there's something else that's sort of pushing or is a North Star for them. Clearly, there was something else that was just deep within you that you were really trying to do good and help others, right? So then how do you arrive at, how do you see sort of as you look back on your life, like arriving at personal injury and representing the injured, the downtrodden?
I got lucky, right? Or someone upstairs was watching out for me because I would have never, ever thought that I would be a personal injury lawyer. And, much like you and your sister, we do it right. We're not doing it for the money, right? I mean, the money comes. I'm not going to lie. It's not like I'm not doing well financially, but I've never done it for the money, right? I've done it to treat people the way I think they need to be treated, and the profession to be honorable. This is an honorable profession, and people don't get that. Like, it starts in law school. Back in the day, we were joking about books. They'd rip out the pages. You guys didn't have books when you went to law school. You had computers. Me, there were people ripping out pages. And some of them are going to be successful, but they're never going to be happy, right? I mean, if you're a miserable person that way and that's the way you have to succeed, then you're never going to be happy.
Yeah.
I think we do it right, and include your firm in this, and that we don't do it for the money. We do it to make sure that we are loving on people, taking care of people, giving them their best day. To me, it's not really about winning or losing. Clearly, I like to win more than lose, but it's really about making sure that my client feels like they've had their day in court.
Yeah.
And, more times than not, if you choose your cases right, you're going to win.
Yeah.
You're going to take some tough ones, and they're going to be tough to win, and you're going to lose some. But as long as your client comes away feeling like, my last loss was probably about 6 years ago. And I say it's a loss. It was a plaintiff verdict, but it was less than the offer, which to me is a loss.
Yeah.
A lot of our compadres are like, I've never lost, but you won less than the offer. So that's a loss. But the dude was, and I told him midway through trial, I'm not sure how this is going to go. You might want to take this offer. Nah, I kind of wanted to take a run at it. When the case was over, he invited me to his wedding, even though we won less than the offer.
Yeah.
So to me, that's what it's about.
Yeah. You mentioned something there that I think I want to follow up on, see if we can flesh this out, because I think it's so important. It's a bit into sort of your psyche as well, but I think it's something that helps young people, attorneys, any amount of experience that they have, and sort of there's sometimes these competing ideas or thoughts, right? You said that I like to win, but at the same time, my client really is the most important. And I think sometimes people think that we have to pick one or the other, right? Like I shouldn't care about winning or losing, and set that aside completely. And the only thing that matters is the client, and the client is the most important thing. But you can have these, it's not competing, but you can come at it from different angles, right? Because there is a competition that also drives us in the middle of service, right?
Yeah, you're 100% right. Look, we all compete, and it's like a chess match, right? You want to figure out what's their next move, but you can do it not for the money. There's a case that I handled with Darren Prosy years ago that got referred to me by another lawyer who I knew, and it was a case out of Sacramento. And I met with the parents of this gal who the police report found that she committed suicide. And after meeting with the parents, I literally took this case in Sacramento, thinking, I'm never going to win this case, but I'm going to prove that she didn't commit suicide because it was so devastating to these parents. And, again, next life, good soul, treat someone better than you want to treat yourself. I took a case that I really felt like it's the right thing for me to do. I mean, no one was going to take this case. It had been rejected by everybody. So I take the case, I set a couple depots, I go up and I take a deposition of the defendant who ran my client over. My client was jogging. She was jogging on a levee, which is like the road over a dam. And it was dusk, and she was in the middle of the lane at dusk. And a car came up and just hit her from behind and killed her. And it was clear to me that she didn't commit suicide. She had just moved there a week before. She had run probably too far. She was trying to lose weight. She was coming home. She was about a mile from her house, and she was probably crossing back over when the car hit her. And so I took the deposition of the cop, and at the end of the deposition of the cop, he's like, Mr. Rizio, I think you're right. I thought it was suicide, but now that you mentioned, and she had just moved here, and it was, I could understand. It probably wasn't suicide. And I'm thinking, when, right?
Wow.
When,
Yeah.
right? And then I take the deposition of the defendant next, and I looked at my client when that depo was over, and I said, what do you think? She goes, that bitch doesn't care she killed my daughter. Right? So I go from a win to now I might have to try this bad boy. And we ended up settling it on the verge of trial. And the clients, they didn't make a lot of money. I mean, their daughter was in the middle of the road at pretty much dusk. But they ended up paying for a bunch of the funeral expenses and stuff. And honestly, Kenny, like at the end of that case, I never expected to hear from them again. They drove down from Sacramento. They knitted or quilted or whatever it's called and brought me down this blanket that still sits in my office. They brought me down all of this stuff, and they're still in touch with me to this day because it was so important in their lives that they knew that their daughter didn't commit suicide. And that's just the right result. I never took that case for money.
And that completely changes the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, yeah.
You said that. Well, thank you for sharing that. That's a great story. You said that in 1995, I think you broke off and created your own firm along with some
Couple other guys, yeah.
couple other guys. How did you know that that was the step that you wanted to take and make? Right, it's a big step.
It's scary.
Most people don't do it. So how did you even go, you know what? I want to try that. My own business.
So we were laughing about books, like you guys didn't have books.
Yeah.
Back in the day, there was a thing called Yellow Pages.
Yeah.
And the
Listen,
one,
I'm older than you think, okay?
well, yeah, maybe you used
I
a
remember
Yellow
seeing
Page
them,
to
yeah.
stand on something to reach the
Yeah,
cookie.
yeah,
You weren't
yeah.
reading it, right? So the cookie drawer is a little high, so the Yellow Page was thick for you. So when I went to this firm, it was, like I said, it was a criminal defense personal injury plaintiff firm, and they were a Yellow Page based firm. This is interesting.
Wow.
And so I immediately, when I got hired there, they had me see every new client because I was kind of a retaining machine for them, right? If it was criminal, they were pulling out their books and giving us cash.
Yeah.
If it was PI, they were signing on the dotted line,
100%,
right?
I could see that.
So I knew pretty quickly that I could survive on Yellow Page as long as I could get them in the door. So I took a lot of new client calls. And getting them in the door is kind of a big part of this.
Yeah.
The one area where we all compete with each other is, all right, I want that
it's
case.
Marketing. Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing that I didn't know, and this was great for me as a young person, I had young kids. I didn't really have to do much because Yellow Page was just the game then, right? Everything came from Yellow Page. I didn't have to worry about anything. And I tried my own cases, and I would brag about how I'm the best lawyer in the Inland Empire. And the funny thing is all these people who are my friends now, they hated me back then. Oh yeah, they hated me because I was a pretty good business person, right?
Yeah.
So I went from the very last in the Yellow Page, and I started there was a guy here called John Palladino before your time.
I've heard the name.
John was a
People
Harvard
talking.
educated lawyer.
Okay.
He was the #1 guy in the Riverside Yellow Page. #1. And Riverside was desirable, right?
Yeah.
So I knew John was older. I had cases against John when I was on the defense. So I called him up. I said, hey, look, I'd like to buy your Yellow Page ads. And he's like, I said, are you anywhere near retiring? So I ended up buying his Yellow Page ad.
Oh, that's brilliant, though, Greg. That's the type of stuff that people aren't thinking of doing, even, right? Jeez,
Well, it ended up biting me in the tail later on with all my friends because they're like, who the heck is this guy? This young kid going from the end to the first, right? Yeah. And also saying how great I am. Now, I did think I was great. I was trying cases. I was getting good results. But, so I learned a valuable lesson, though, because it took me a long time to shed that image of the guy who's just all about himself. Because I have never really been all about myself. At that time, I was just getting my own cases and trying my own cases, right?
You were starting your career. You were building a business. I mean, unless nobody's going to give them to you. You have to go get them.
I used to laugh. I joke with some of my friends now. I'm like, what was I supposed to advertise? Like, well, if you don't hire X, I'm pretty good. I mean, come on, it's advertising, right? So it was what it was.
How did you, wow, I love this. This is awesome. Business, how were you exposed to that? Sometimes people when they're kids, they used to sell like stuff in their neighborhood or got good, at selling, doing that or some other stuff throughout the course of their lives. How did you sort of gain some maybe sales skills or just business?
I think a lot of sales skills like you have it. It's just be yourself, be genuine, be honest. To get a big door a big case in the door, as you well know, they have to like you, they have to trust you, they have to feel like you're capable of doing it. Someone comes in the door and like, well, I think I can do it. I'm not so sure. Let me give it a shot. I mean, aren't they going to come hire you or Shapiro or Bentley or somebody else? I mean, they are, right? So you have to have a certain amount of confidence in yourself in what we do. And I've never been shy of confidence. That's just one thing. In fact, the funny story is my father-in-law, when he first met me, my mother-in-law and father-in-law had been divorced. And my mother-in-law was living in Kansas with my other father-in-law now. I met my wife's dad. And my mother-in-law said to the dad, like, well, what do you think of her new guy? And he goes, well, that guy doesn't lack in confidence. So basically, my father-in-law called me cocky from the moment he met me, right? So I just think there's a lot to what we do. What we do, Kenny's hard. I mean, you know that.
Yeah.
It's not an easy gig. It's not for there's a lot of people who can't do what you and I do, and they shouldn't, right? Either if they're doing it for the money, they're never going to be happy. If they're doing it for, you know, if they like security, you and I know, I mean, it's kind of like this. So it is what it is. So.
Were there any particular challenges as you were getting your business started, the firm started, that you know, you saw, overcame? And I think people love these stories because they might find themselves in the middle of those challenges, right? And then seeing that, you know, wow, Greg went through something similar and made it out, like that gives people, you know, hope.
So when I started my firm with these other guys, we had a thing, we called it the quota system. If you didn't bring in enough money every month, you didn't get paid that month.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of, you know,
it's an incentive, boy.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, you know, you still, it tested your moral fiber too. Right? You could settle a case for maybe a little less than it was worth and be paid that month, or you could hold out and get what it's worth and get paid in 2 months, right? And, you know, fortunately for me, my partners and I, we were always more of the long term. So there were months that I didn't get paid. There were months that I had to write a check back into the firm to make sure they got paid, right? Yeah. And that was challenging, but I never had doubts that we were going to make it. One thing that we had going for us was I had a partner that was raised in Japan and spoke fluent Japanese.
Oh, wow.
In fact, he was actually a model in Japan. Like if you went by billboards, he was a model, not like a, you know, I'm, you know, the lawyer model, like a model. You know, and so they all knew, all the Japanese in the community knew who he was, and they all wanted to hire him to handle their case because he's this really good-looking white guy who speaks fluent Japanese. So we kind of had that going for us, and they would hire us to do hourly civil cases. So at one point, we ended up getting a big case in, and they were paying us by the hour. And I was one of the guys who could come in and bill against that. So at some point, it was like, I always knew I was going to get paid. If I was low that month, I'd come in and do a couple depots or, you know, do something that needed to be done on that case. So,
That's awesome.
But it was challenging.
Yeah, no, I bet. Over the course of you know, your career, and particularly with business, has there been anything that maybe you've heard, maybe like a book or anything that you think that you'd recommend, or just any sort of classes that you would tell people, you know what, you should take that, or pay attention to this, because they don't teach us any of this stuff in law school. And law school is great. I had a great time, right? But when you're talking about creating a business, you don't know it until you started. Then you go, oh, wow, there's all these things that.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I'm a big fan of Rick Friedman's Rules of the Road. Most people are who do what we do. I read Reptile. You know,
some people,
you know, I think if you're a good trial lawyer, you're naturally trying to frame things that way anyway. One of the things I did as a young lawyer, which I didn't realize how important it was, I told you I started an insurance defense firm out here, and one of the partners told me, like, you know, you really need to get to know the Code of Civil Procedure. So I was flying back to New Jersey for my summer vacation with my family, and I actually took one of those old books, and I literally read the entire Code of Civil Procedure, and it made so much sense to me that to this day I kind of have a natural feel of what I can and can't get away with in civil procedure. And I'm like, I don't really remember where it is, but I know there's this thing
it's in there, and I'll find it.
And and sure enough, it's almost always there, and it's almost in every code. When you read the first 4 codes, the rest of the codes are pretty similar, right? And I would actually strongly, as boring as it was, I mean, it literally was like going to the beach and chewing sand at times. It was like, oh my gosh, really? But it really kind of opened my eyes, and law made sense to me because of that.
It's funny you mentioned that, because in law school, my first year, my favorite class was Civ Pro, Civil Procedure. And nobody believes me when I say that. And a big part of it was the professor. He was just amazing. He was so great. But I just
You'd have to be amazing to make that your favorite class.
Yeah. And I tell, you know, he knows, and he's like, oh. But but that has helped so much as well, because it gives you, certainly, particularly for somebody who had no experience at all with the law, had no idea what any of this was, that it created some sort of like framework for you,
The
right?
structure.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
One more thing with business, just finding the right partner, business partner. And I think, it's a question and an issue that many people deal with in many respects throughout the course of their careers, right? There's partners that can be there for a long time, some that are shorter than others, right? And so what are those things? Right now you have a business partner, Darren Lipinski, who like I know as well. Is just awesome. Like I love Darren. But how do you identify, who is going to be that person that you're going to partner up with?
Yeah, I would warn anybody. So it's natural when you want to go out on your own because it's scary to go out with somebody else. And because you give each other confidence to do it. I think it's a mistake, frankly. I mean, it is a marriage, and I have had partners in the past, and it was a nasty, bloody divorce, right?
Yeah.
So you really, really need to know who your partner is. You really, really need to understand and believe that they are like your family member. Right? If Darren Lipinski and I were to separate, it'd be like losing a brother, right? And you have to have the right attitude. It has to be a give and take, not just a take. So it's a hard balance. I understand why people go out with partners, because it does give you strength and courage. It did to me.
Yeah.
But those two guys and I, one of them and I still get along. The other guy and I, it was not a pretty divorce.
Yeah. And is it that you're looking? I mean, in your experience now, what you would tell someone is it that you're looking for maybe traits that would complement yours, or skills that would complement yours, or is it just like, hey, like we kind of work the same way
No, I would say being a good friend's not enough. If they're just a good friend, that friendship can be a problem. I mean, unless they're your like best friend from childhood and you know them to the core. I would say before you take on a law partner, know them to the core. Right?
No, absolutely. All right. And I know that mentorship, moving to a different subject here, is something that's big for you. I mentioned when we started that, you've been a great supporter of ours. You've just been encouraged, and without knowing anything about me, right? I just showed up in the Inland Empire scene. I had been in LA. I always lived out here, but, opened up my practice out here in 2020, and, just kind of show up and start trying to meet people, and you welcomed me with open arms. And I've seen you do that with people as well, and not expecting anything in return. And, why is that so important? Because that is an anomaly, Greg. It really is. And to the extent that you do it. And so why is that so important to you?
Well, first off, kudos to you for opening in 2020, right?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Kenny. You got to get kudos there. A lot of that comes back to what we talked about earlier, like coming out of the yellow page and all. Like, honestly, Kenny, a lot of my really close friends right now really didn't like me at one point, right? Because they didn't know me, and I was raising kids, and it was great for me because I would get cases, try cases, but then be home to see my kids, right? And I've kind of shared this, that as great as it was for my family life, it was kind of lonely as in my professional life. Right? I mean, I didn't get the satisfaction that I have now of taking people under my wing, or just introducing them around, or making them feel like they can do it, right? One of my favorite, I always used to joke when I started talking at MCLEs, I used to use the Rob Schneider, in every movie that Adam Sandler does, you'll see Rob Schneider going, you can do it, and that's kind of who I am. I'm like you can do it. You don't, when you came in here, I could instantly see your heart, right? And I'm not going to take everybody around if I don't think that they have the right attitude or the right heart. But if you have the right attitude and you have the right heart, then it's on me to treat you better than I want to be treated. It's on me to make sure that your clients, because you're a good dude, your clients are being represented by someone who knows what they're doing and is good at what they do. So I'm going to be there. I'm going to invite anybody to come to my office, and we're going to help you make sure that your clients get their day in court and do their best. Because, again, I shouldn't just want to treat you better than I want to be treated. I want your clients to be treated better than I want to be. I mean, it goes deeper than just that one relationship, especially in this profession. We are competitors. We just are. But we're always the David versus Goliath, right? And we need that support. We need people to be there to help us when we're down, because we're all going to have those days. And to me, that's kind of what it's all about. That's why I get involved in CAOC and try and protect the state, through the legislature. It's why I did Calabota, because I want to make this profession honorable. When I die, no one's going to remember me 100 years when I die. No one's going to remember any of us 100 years when we're dead, right? But I do want to make sure that this profession is in better shape when I'm gone than it is while I'm here.
Yeah, I love that. And the way that you're saying that, it goes layers deep, right? It's not just about like our relationship, but it's, you're right, the clients and what they're experiencing, and then the community at large. Your work with CAOC, all of California, right? And it's layers deep. It's about the community and the world, really, the society that you want to live in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of that old Coke, if you teach your neighbor, if everyone treated their neighbor the right way, ultimately the world would be a much better place. Yeah. Unfortunately, people just don't see it that way. A lot of people just see the world through their own eyes. So.
Yeah. If a young attorney were to come up to you and say, Mr. Rizio, I want to craft my career in sort of the same vein that you have. Like, I love everything that you're doing. Like, what are the maybe 2 or 3 things that you would tell them to start doing today?
So I get asked that a lot. And the first thing I warn them is, look, if you're really going to do this the right way, it's not a job. It's a lifestyle. I mean, my family, to a degree, suffers. Every one of my clients, every single one of them has my cell phone. Yeah. Every single one of them, right? Because I'm supposed to be there for them. I am, we were called counselors at one point for a certain reason, because we're especially in our field, Kenny.
I love that. I love that, counselors.
Yeah, especially in our field, because we're dealing with people who are like, they can't work, right? So they have no money coming in the door. They're in a lot of pain. They're fighting with their wife, and they're not treating their kids well, and they just need someone to be there for them. Yeah. So, the amount of eye rolls I get from my wife when we're at dinner and a client calls, well, none of my clients call. The one thing I'm good at is like, just don't call me, text me. I'll call you back as soon as I know my wife's not going to kill me for calling you back. I don't want to be single because I called you back, right? But they all have my cell phone. They all, they're all really respectful. Everyone thinks I'm crazy to do that. They're all super respectful.
It's the same thing for me, actually, because I tell people the same exact thing. It's like they all have it, and everybody would say, don't give them your cell phone. But now, maybe when I was working at another firm, I definitely wouldn't give them. But now it's like my firm, you feel responsible. So it's like, here's my cell phone. But they're super respectful as well, and you keep them informed. But I don't actually, have that they're calling at some like ridiculous hours. Sometimes things happen, right? But they're pretty respectful.
Yeah, they are. And like I said at the very beginning, you have a good heart. I can see that right away, right? I mean, that is a good plaintiff lawyer. But don't go into plaintiff law if you want to have a 9-to-5 job. Yeah. Right. And if you do, you're not doing it right, and your clients aren't going to be happy with you. Yeah. So that's the first thing I say.
This is our second home. It's a primary home. Sometimes it feels like.
Yeah, trust me. Yeah. But I was doing criminal and yellow page days. My wife would laugh, like, because we had those, this is again before your time, we had those pagers, right? And I'd get a pager and I'd go to a cell phone or a pay phone, and they're like, yeah, my brother just got arrested. All right, meet me at my office at 2 a.m. and bring cash, right? Yeah. I'll be there tomorrow, but you got to have cash. My wife's like, you're going to the office to meet someone who's charged with crime at 2 a.m., right? Hey, baby, got to make my quota.
That's funny, yeah. So it's a lifestyle. That's the number one thing you'd say. Maybe is there a second thing maybe you tell young attorneys who are sort of getting started?
I think law school does us and I'm teaching law school and I'm teaching trial practice, but I think law school does us a disservice, right? I would have never, ever in a million years thought I'd be a personal injury lawyer, right? Doctors, you have to go do rotations, you go to surgery, you go to counseling, you go to, healthcare, whatever, emergency rooms. We just get out and have no concept whatsoever. I mean, if I took a property job, I would kill myself. I mean, I literally think, as the positive person I am, if I had to do property and fee simples and rule of perpetuities, I'd probably kill myself.
No disrespect to our attorney.
Yeah,
brother.
no disrespect to you, because there's a place for all of you who love that. I'm just not that guy, right? It's just. So I would say, if you want to be a lawyer, really you're going to have to struggle to find what's your niche, right? What are you going to want to do? Again, property's not what I want to do. Family's not what I want to do, although I see elements of family that I could see myself doing it, because I get to care for a person through a difficult time. Property, it's like, and again, no disrespect to anyone who does property, it's just not me, right? It's not personal interaction as much. It's, how do we record this right? Or how do we separate this way? Or, and I love people who can do that, but if I were there, it just wouldn't be me. I don't think I'd be a lawyer, right?
So struggling to find, and so being exposed to as many of those opportunities as possible, right? And law schools I think have gotten better, still not to the degree you're saying, about offering clinics or offering different. I tell people, like, take those opportunities, like go, because you just kind of want to see what it looks like, see if it's something you like.
Once again, you have a good heart. You're mentoring. You're exactly. I mean, look, everything you're asking me about, I can say the exact same thing to you, right? You're doing it right, and I love that about you and your sister and your firm.
Thank you. One thing I hear you say a lot, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this, because I certainly didn't do this in the beginning of my career, but I've heard you say this a lot, is get involved early. Because I didn't until I opened up my own practice. I was just kind of in the office working, which is fine. But the importance of getting involved in bar associations and, can you speak to that?
Again, I think it goes back to my Yellow Page days and the fact that I was sort of a lonelier lawyer and I didn't find fulfillment. I mean, I found fulfillment in my cases, but, being involved in meeting people, Robin Lewis is funny because we do the New Lawyer Academy together, and she's like, I'm convinced, like, if you went to a court in some strange place, you would know someone. And I'm like, I would at least know who to call and say, tell me about this judge, right? I believe that there is a depth of fulfillment in your professional career by being involved and meeting other lawyers. It's also good for your practice, right? I mean, I get a lot of cases from DAs or family lawyers. I'm sure you do too, right? I mean, it's, but I don't do it for that. I do it because I really feel like this is a noble profession that needs to be treated that way. And if someone's in court and they need help, I want to help them, you know? And I would hope that if I needed help in a court, they would help me.
Yeah. And speaking of service, you, 2 years ago, you served as president of the Consumer Attorneys of California, which is one of the, if not the most important organization for plaintiff attorneys to be a part of. Can you talk to us just a little bit about what that was, that experience, and what that sort of entailed? I think it's important for people to be involved. And I think sometimes people don't know that that exists and the importance of being involved in something like that.
Well, first off, I want to thank you, because when I was president, I dragged you in on the legislation because
I was honored you asked me to.
Well, it's important, right? I mean, everyone who was dealing with that piece of legislation, which was kind of what I always call the California Rule 26, they were all big firms. And I'm like, look, there's going to be firms, solos, people that like we do, that need to understand. And you were instrumental on that.
Oh, thank you.
So, again, I saw your heart, I knew, and you were fantastic on that. So, being the president of the Consumer Attorneys of California, honestly, it was probably my favorite year of practice ever.
Wow.
But I have to tell you, man, it is a lot of work, and it is not cheap, and it is tiring.
I know. I saw you everywhere, and I was like, he must be tired all the time.
It was tiring. You have to fly to Sacramento a lot. You meet with it's being a lawyer in a different field, which makes it fun.
Yeah.
Right.
So what was it that you were doing for people to know what that entails?
So people don't realize how close we were to losing remote appearances. Like, we were just this close. I had to fly up there, and court reporters were against it. A lot of interpreters were against it. There was a lot of big unions against the remote appearances. And I got a call saying, I think it was SB 21. You need to fly up here and testify on SB 21 next week because we're not sure we're going to be able to continue to do remote appearances. Yeah. Most people don't understand. Everyone loves remote appearances. No one understands. It's this close at all times to potentially being lost. And we were able to get that through. I remember flying up there and thinking, all right, how do I make this real to people who don't practice law? All they see is this. And I remember as I flew up there, and this is always the challenge of framing everything, because now you have to learn to frame into legislature instead of jurors, right?
That's cool.
But they are your jury. You just have to realize that they are smart. It's almost like expert depots, right? They're smarter in legislation than you are, but they're not smarter in the law. So I went up there, and you only have a certain amount of time, and I kind of explained it was, hey, look, what you don't get is if I have a client who's a single parent and they got to go to court in Los Angeles, they have to get up, they have to they have to leave their house at 6 or 6:30. They have to get their kid to school, get their kids, lunch and make sure their kids are going to be picked up because they're going to have to leave at 6 a.m. to make it to court. They're going to then have to learn to park. They're going to stand in line to go through a metal detector. They're going to sit in a hallway. And they have no concept how hard that is for our clients, right? So
how hard it is for attorneys.
It's hard for us. But that's part of our gig.
But how much harder would it be for somebody who doesn't have any exposure to any of this?
Right.
Yeah.
And especially you're doing it for a minor's compromise, right? It's all a good reason. You're trying to get this, this family some money for this poor child who's been hurt. But the mom or dad who's, single parent and sole breadwinner has to take a day off of work and drive the traffic and get to court and find parking. And they don't get reimbursed for any of that. None of the people in the legislature, other than maybe Umberg, because he was a lawyer, kind of understood that. So telling them that story, we tried to, my year, get court reporters. There was no way we were going to beat that. The union was pretty strong on that. Last year we did lemon law. I was highly involved in that, which really saved our tails on fee caps and stuff. A lot of cases would have not been able to be taken. So it's an important element that people don't get, but it really is important.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it's one of those that it's something that's you and this group of really dedicated attorneys, right? That and staff and everybody with CAOC, Nancy Drabble, all of them. But plaintiff consumer attorneys are just kind of operating day to day. They don't know that this stuff is happening, but everything that you are doing and CAOC is doing is having a direct impact on making the practice and lives for their clients better.
Once again, I could say, put a mirror on yourself, right?
Yeah.
You've been doing the same stuff. Your sister does the same stuff. It's
Well, I'm trying to highlight you right now.
You don't need to highlight me. Look, this is we're a team, Kenny. We just are. Right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And I will be here. I know you're there for me, and I will be here for you. Anything you need. You need me to come help you with a trial, just give me a call. As long as I'm not in my own, I'm there for it.
Absolutely.
So,
Greg, thank you so much for your time. Again, being mindful of your very valuable time. Thank you for being here, coming here, and just chatting with us. I think it's something that our audience is going to love. Hearing from you a little bit about your background and to hopefully be inspired. So,
except for maybe those real estate lawyers, they might not like what I had to say. But again, I could say the same thing about you, right? Thanks for bringing this stuff out and highlighting it and getting the message out. It's a lot of this is about messaging, getting plaintiff lawyers to understand how important CAOC is. You're doing that stuff. You're never going to see me do a podcast, dude. I mean, I'm just too old to figure this stuff out. But you're getting that word out there for younger lawyers, and that is so important. So thank you, and thanks, Sharon, and your family for doing that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being here. And, as we wrap this episode up, thank you to all our guests, to all our listeners, rather, for being here with us and listening, share, please comment. Again, if you haven't subscribed, I would ask that you subscribe and share this with somebody you think is going to benefit a lot from this. There were so many great nuggets and pieces of advice that Greg gave us today. So I ask that you share those. We have a great guest lined up for next episode as well. So we'll see you then.
Bye.
There you go.